This is one of the most famous photographs of the Holocaust. It shows a man at the edge of a pit filled with bodies, the whole photograph of which I am not allowed to show on YouTube, as it contains corpses. Behind him stands a uniformed, bespectacled killer holding a pistol in his extended right arm. Observing what is happening is a large group of soldiers in German uniform and one in civilian clothes. The photograph emerged in 1961 during the Jerusalem trial of high-ranking Nazi functionary Adolf Eichmann. It had been in the possession of Al Moss, a Holocaust survivor, who said he'd acquired it in 1945, but knew nothing of its context. Mr. Moss said at the time that he'd made the photograph public so the world would know what went on in Eichmann's time. When the photograph turned up, on its reverse was scribbled, "The Last Jew in Vinnitsa," written probably by a triumphalist Einsatzgruppe killer. However, new research has shown that this murder didn't take place in Vinnitsa, but in Berdichiv, which is around 80 kilometers to the north, and it has identified the murderer. Jürgen Matthäus was head of research at the US Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. In the September 2025 issue of Zeitschrift für Geschichtswissenschaft, he named the killer as Jakobus Onnen, 34, a teacher from the town of Tichelwarf, today part of Vienna, some 3 kilometers from the German border with the Netherlands. One of Onnen's living relatives provided Dr. Matthäus with family photographs, and an artificial intelligence tool made the match with 99.9% confidence. Jakobus Onnen was born on the 3rd of August 1906 as the 5th child of the headmaster Johann Normanus Engelken Onnen in the village of Tichelwarf, which is today part of Vienna, located 3 kilometers from the border with the Netherlands. He initially went to school in Vienna until 1921, when he attended the Realgymnasium for boys in Leer, Lower Saxony, which is some 5 kilometers to the northeast of Vienna. He graduated in 1927. His father was wealthy enough to send him to Göttingen University, where he took a degree in modern language, which in this case meant English, French, Dutch and Spanish. The University of Göttingen was founded in 1737 by George II, King of Great Britain and Elector of Hanover. During World War I, about 3/4 of the students fought, 726 of them, as well as 22 university staff members, lost their lives. On the evening of the 8th of November 1918, a Workers' and Soldiers' Council was formed in Göttingen. On the 9th of November 1918, a red flag with 2 holes in the shape of a missing crescent moon and star flew from the town hall. Some students formed a body to establish an advisory committee for academic affairs to assist the Workers' and Soldiers' Council. However, as a rule, the students tend to side with the reactionary right. In the subsequent turbulent period of the Weimar Republic, the Reich government requested student battalions as temporary volunteers for the Reichswehr from almost all universities to maintain public order. These battalions were deployed throughout the country. On the 22nd of July 1920, the Deutsche Hochschulung, the DHR, was founded in Göttingen to unite the nationalistic and völkisch-minded students. It gained considerable influence, particularly in the first half of the 1920s, within the local general student committees and their umbrella organization, the German Student Union. It won 16 out of 20 seats in the Göttingen Students' Union elections of May 1921. The DHR was significantly involved in numerous anti-Republican and anti-Semitic actions at German universities during the 1920s, and is considered a pioneer of National Socialist ideology within the student body. With the rise of the National Socialist German Students' League, the NSDStV, founded in 1926, the DHR lost its significance. The 21-year-old Oman moved into this environment, and possibly this is where he became radicalized. Onnen became politically active, and on the 1st of November 1931 he joined the Nazi Party, party number 723098. He enlisted in the Sturmabteilung, the SA, in January 1932, and on the 1st of November 1933 he joined the SS. His language studies came in useful in a couple of journeys he made. In March and April 1933 he was in London. He claimed in his curriculum vitae that he'd been able to speak with British trade unionists about the structures and goals of the Third Reich. It strikes me that this was a little premature, as Hitler had only managed to seize total power in March 1933. Of course, Onnen could have said some of his opinions and what he'd been talking about with his mates at the Nazi Party and in the SA and SS. The following year, in August 1933, he was able to travel to Spain and stay there for more than 2 months. From the 4th and 19th of October 1934, what has been called the Asturian Revolution took place in the Asturias region of northern Spain. It started with a miners' strike aimed against the new right-wing government, which had been democratically elected. The strike and subsequent demonstrations eventually developed into a violent revolutionary uprising in which rebels took over Asturias by force and attacked and destroyed not only government and police buildings, but those associated with Catholicism, such as religious buildings, churches and convents. This revolt was put down, leading to the deaths of around 1,500 people on the side of the rebels and around 250 people on the side of the government. This was the forerunner of the forthcoming civil war, which was to break out less than 2 years later. Onnen stated that this revolution gave him the opportunity to become thoroughly acquainted with the internal political turmoil of that country. He also got acquainted with the customs of Spain by attending a bullfight, the bloody nature of which shocked him. From October 1934 to March 1936, Onnen worked towards his assessor exam here in Heiligenstadt. This was a requirement for his employment in the German Colonial School in Witzenhausen. In March 1936, Onnen passed his pedagogical exam in Magdeburg, after which he was able to work as a secondary school teacher teaching French, English and physical education at the Colonial School in Witzenhausen, some 15 kilometers or so to the east of Kassel. Founded in 1898, the Colonial School was located in a former monastery and estate in Witzenhausen in northern Hesse by the Werra River. After 1945, the Werra River became the border between East and West Germany, and Witzenhausen became very much a backwater. I came here in October 2020 through my interest in the former East German border. Standing almost on the former border above Witzenhausen is Hanstein Castle. It was here I stayed over a weekend, and I walked up and down along the former border, along the inner border road created by East German authorities to stop people fleeing from the communist bloc. The castle itself was out of bounds to visitors during these years. Its high tower served as a lookout for the border guards. It is therefore somewhat ironic that the very institution that was designed to help Germans colonize other countries was to find itself as a direct result of National Socialism on the border of where the Soviet Empire ended. As for me, Witzenhausen also stands out for another reason. It was the last place where I managed to buy a litre of diesel at under €1. In its heyday, the Colonial School at Witzenhausen enjoyed an excellent reputation. Along with classrooms and accommodation, its extensive grounds included workshops and laboratories, gardens, conservatories for tropical plants, and a country estate located some distance away. On around 400 hectares of land, the school farmed, kept livestock, and grew fruit, tobacco, and wine. It was, in the words of the school's 1912 publication, a complete world in miniature. The purchase of the estate and the operation of the school were funded through donations and fees, and the school fees were very steep, although scholarships for the most promising students existed. In addition, both the imperial and Prussian governments provided subsidies. The school had been established as a private limited company, it's a GmbH, and continued to be privately run, although both subsidies and influence by the government increased in the aftermath of the First World War. After 1939, direct supervision tightened yet further. Government representatives now chaired final exams, and graduates received the state-sanctioned title of a government-examined colonial agriculturalist, staatlicher geprüfter Colonial Landwirt. The school was run by Ernst Albert Fabarius, who ran it from its founding until his death at the age of 68 in 1927. His successor in 1928 was Dr. Wilhelm Arning, who lived from 1865 to 1943. He was a former military doctor who'd served in German East Africa. He was replaced by the Nazi Party member Karl W.H. Koch in 1934, and we can see his photograph here from the 1938 book to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the school. I tried to find a bit more about the background of Koch, but all I could come up with were his dates. He was born in 1882 and he died in 1970. A majority of students had volunteered for military service as soon as hostilities broke out in August 1914. After teaching staff became liable for the draft in 1915 to 1916, all teaching was suspended for the duration of the war. The school resumed classes after the end of the war, even though Germany no longer had any colonies. The chairman of the school, Ernst Albert Fabarius, saw the role of the colonial school, not least in keeping colonial sentiment alive in the Weimar Republic, and he wasn't alone in this effort. Many people supported the colonial movement, and there was strong demand for the return of the colonies, and not just from the nationalist right. Fabarius argued that Germany needed to continue its engagement in the global economy even after its defeat in order to maintain and expand its influence overseas. The aim of the school was therefore to prepare educated Germans for settling in all parts of the world, to contribute to Germanness abroad. Fabarius had suggested a role for his institution in a possible future German colonization of Eastern Europe during the First World War, an idea that resurfaced periodically during the 1920s and 1930s and was propagated amongst others by Richard Walter Darre, who had studied at the colonial school and who became Minister for Food and Agriculture in the National Socialist government, and was one of the authors of the horrendous hunger plan, which aimed to starve millions of people in Eastern Europe. With the advent of the National Socialist government, and especially after the initial German victories in the Second World War, hopes of regaining the colonies or even acquiring a greater colonial empire arose. For the regime, this consideration was secondary. The focus of their colonial ambitions lay not in the former colonies in Africa and the Pacific, that is to say what is today's Namibia, Tanzania, Togo, Cameroon or New Guinea, but in Eastern Europe. Colonial activists from the early 1930s onwards embraced the idea of using Witzenhausen to train a future governing elite for a German empire overseas. As the events of the war increasingly impacted the school's activities, this became impossible. During the war, as in the First World War, student numbers fell and teaching was suspended in 1943, and the buildings served eventually as a military hospital. However, given all this, we can imagine that for someone like Jakobus Onnen in the mid-1930s, this was a dream job. It would have combined his nationalism with his intellectualism and the idea that he was part of a greater German empire training the future colonists. In 1938, he made a major contribution to a book to celebrate 40 years of the school entitled Origin and Development of the German Colonial School, Witzenhausen. You can see the chapter he wrote here. The book also contains photographs of people, and there's also a group of SA men, and I suppose it's possible that Onnen is in this photograph too, although I couldn't see him. I'll give you a link in the description and you can see if you can spot him now that you know what he looks like. A graph at the end of the book shows the growth in student numbers up to 1938. The description of the graph reads the following: attendance figure for the German School of Kassel from 1899 to 1938. What does the line tell us about the school's development? 1. The increase up to the First World War is unmistakable. 2. German soldiers go to war and attendance drops. 3. After the November Revolution, large numbers of retired soldiers seek training to find a new home overseas. 4. The years of inflation, 1920 to 1924, cause the line to fall. 5. The stabilization of the currency and the apparent economic boom 1924 to 1928 lead to a renewed rise. 6. The line continues to rise from 1928 to 1932. Germany's desperate economic situation fuels the desire to emigrate. 7. After the seizure of power, economic conditions improved. The Third Reich provided jobs and sustenance, and the demand to travel abroad decreased in the years 1933 to 1936. 8. The Reich had become strong. The solution to the colonial question seemed assured, and demand increases. Now, unless I've misunderstood it, in 1938 there was now a demand to start colonizing somewhere. Or was it to flee the country? As much as this may have been a dream job for Onnen, his superiors at the school were not happy with his performance. A May 1939 report stated that the teaching staff suffers in both their reputation and their performance because of immoral and conscienceless individuals like teacher Onnen. Apart from his inability to master the language he claims to teach, there are drinking parties and fraternizing with students. This report, however, says something different, and is probably the next place he moved to. This file is from the boys' high school in Hochenelbe in the Sudetenland, or Ruchlabe in Czech, as it is called today, and he's described quite differently. The headmaster attests to his good character, open, free, amiable, soldierly demeanour. He is described as reserved in discussions and ideologically sound. Whilst his otherwise good general knowledge was not yet sufficient in colonial matters, he was deemed suitable for higher level colonial teaching. I would suggest that the loss of his job at Witzenhausen might have radicalized Onnen further. This might have made him very bitter and explain why he now turned to the organized violence of the state. He joined the SS Death's Head Standarte Oberbayern, part of the Waffen-SS, which was based at Dachau. After 2 failed engagements, on the 3rd of April 1939, Onnen married Ruth Hoboter, born on the 13th of March 1908. Following the invasion of Poland, Onnen was transferred to the Ordnungspolizei, the Order Police, and from January 1940 he was stationed at Płock, northwest of Warsaw. I've been unable to confirm what unit he was in, but at that time Police Battalion 13, originally from Königsberg, was formed up in Płock. Amongst other things, its tasks included guarding the ghetto in Płock, which was set up in September 1940. The battalion participated in the murder of numerous people. However, Onnen's role was that of training. I'm unable to say if he took part in any homicides in Poland. In July 1941, the battalion was placed under the command of the higher SS and police leader of northern Russia and deployed in the Baltic states, where it participated in mass murder. However, Onnen was deployed in the same function, but elsewhere. He was sent to Einsatzgruppe C, commanded by Otto Rasch. Rasch served in the Imperial Navy during World War I. He then got 2 doctorates in law, political economy and philosophy, writing his dissertations on the housing market and housing policy in the United Kingdom during the war and post-war period, and the second doctorate was awarded for a work entitled The Constitutional Position of the President of the Prussian Parliament. Nonetheless, he too was involved in extreme right-wing politics whilst working as a corporate lawyer in Leipzig. After the Nazi Party seized power, as a party hack, Rasch was appointed mayor of Radeberg on the 1st of July 1933 and mayor of Wittenberg in June 1935. Within the Nazi Party, Rasch was active as a district speaker, district group leader of the Hunting Association, and chair of the National Socialist Lawyers Association. His term as mayor of Wittenberg was not extended because questionable costs surfaced during the construction of his official villa. In any case, Rasch didn't want to pursue a local political career, and he took up full employment in the security service for which he'd already been working since 1933. In 1937, Rasch became head of the Gestapo in Frankfurt am Main. After the Anschluss of Austria, the annexation of that country, he was security director for Upper Austria in Linz from March to May 1938. After the dismemberment of the remaining part of Czechoslovakia, Rasch served as SD chief in Prague for 5 weeks from March 1939 and from November 1939 was inspector of the SD, or that's to say, the head of the security service, and the security police in Königsberg. Following the invasion of Poland, Rasch was the leader of Einsatzgruppe ZBV in connection with Operation Tannenberg, the murder of those Poles who might be opposed to the occupation. In early 1940, Rasch established the Soldau transit camp, according to a later statement by him, specifically for the purpose of carrying out the necessary liquidations discreetly. Around 600 Poles and Soviet prisoners of war were murdered there. In the late spring of 1941, Rasch, and probably Onnen also, reported to the Düben Heath, where the Einsatzgruppen trained before going on their murder spree. Here they did team building and listened to lectures. Following the invasion of the Soviet Union, Rasch, as head of Einsatzgruppe C, moved initially behind the army in the direction, to begin with, from Lvov and Tarnopol in formerly Soviet-occupied Poland, past Zolochev and Kremenets in the direction of Kiev, where on the 29th or 30th of September 1941 it murdered over 33,741 people at Babi Yar. Up until October 1941, 80,000 people were murdered by Einsatzgruppe C. Onnen probably took part in the massacres on the way. Berdichev is located 44 kilometers south of Zhytomyr. In 1789, Jews constituted 3/4 of Berdichev's population. At this time, Berdichev was an important center of Hasidism. There was also a significant Polish and Ukrainian-speaking minority. Joseph Conrad, who wrote Heart of Darkness, upon which the film Apocalypse Now was based, was born there. Soviet writer Vasily Grossman was also from here. His mother Anna was murdered in Berdichev during the Holocaust. On the eve of war, more than half of the population of the city was Jewish. The first German units entered Berdichev on the 7th of July 1941 at 1900 hours, and, according to the memorial book, the persecution started immediately. The massacre shown here took place on the 28th of July 1941 within the walls of Berdichev's citadel. A number of other massacres of the Jews of Berdichev were to follow. According to the Einsatzgruppe report, at this massacre 70 Jews and 1 non-Jew were murdered. The murderer Onnen had been recognized by a retired schoolteacher who believed that Onnen had been his wife's uncle. This horrifying image has played a role in our family for decades, the retired schoolteacher wrote. He also supplied photographs of the murderer, which allowed artificial intelligence comparison to take place. The name of the victim is not known. As the tide of war changed, the Einsatzgruppen were used to a large extent in fighting partisans, who, unlike their previous victims, could shoot back. It was in one of these confrontations that SS-Unterscharführer Jakobus Onnen was killed on the 12th of August 1943. How are locals treating this news in the small town of Wiener? Here is a local news service with an article entitled "Alleged SS War Criminal from Wiener. What's next for the memorial?" I'll give you a link to the article so you can read the whole thing for yourself. This article was written by Holger Schischka and quotes the mayor of Wiener, Heiko Abbas, as saying that the name of an SS henchman most likely responsible for heinous war crimes is painful and disturbing. Under no circumstances will we simply allow the name to remain on the war memorial without context or critical examination. I will personally ensure this. Considering that we opened the meeting place for Jewish life in our city only a few months ago, this revelation is particularly tragic. And Abbas announced that the council administration will definitely address this issue intensively. Abbas continued, "In our efforts to commemorate the past, we must and will make it clear that Wiener, through the loss of Jewish life during the Nazi era, is not only a city that mourns great losses, rather also we in Wiener itself, as in this case, in Ukraine, through a native of Tichelwarf, we are a city of perpetrators." The mayor said that he intended to discuss the issue with the working groups on the burning of the synagogue and Stolpersteine. The Stolpersteine are, which could be translated as stumbling stones, they're memorials which are placed all over Germany to commemorate the victims of National Socialism. Indeed, you can see them in a number of videos I've done. I've actually put the camera on the Stolpersteine and then I may have said some words about the people who are being commemorated. My understanding is that the local authority now intends to put a QR code to explain more on the subject of the murderer Jakobus Onnen and to put it all into context. I presume, but I don't know, that this may be a bit easier as the name of Jakobus Onnen is the last one on that particular stone. In other videos, I've addressed the problem of how the families of those who were killed in wars must feel about the murderers and those responsible who are commemorated in the same place. For example, in April 2017, I visited the old cemetery in Berchtesgaden, where I brought this subject up whilst being taken around by a gentleman who restored the old memorials to the war dead, and I'll give you a link to that as well in the description. On this site, there are biographies of a number of highly educated mass murderers who occupied high positions, like, for example, Otto Rasch. There are also stories of a number of non-educated killers who didn't advance very far in rank, and indeed some who did. But this is the first time that we have a well-educated person who, despite many years of activity in the party, only made it to Unterscharführer, the lowest non-commissioned rank in the SS. I hope you found this interesting. The person who deserves credit for the information for this is Jürgen Matthäus, and of course you can read his article in the September 2025 issue of Zeitschrift für Geschichtswissenschaft. The background information about the Colonial School, the desired career of the future murderer, comes from Transnational Educational Historical Perspective, the Deutsche Colonial Schule, 1898 to 1944, by Sylvia Kesper-Biermann. And I'll give you a link to that as well. Now, if there's any mistakes in the presentation, however, they'll almost certainly be my fault, as I've added a fair bit of supplementary information. For example, I don't know if Onnen was Training Reserve Police Battalion 13, as I could find no record of his name after a search. Now, thank you very much for listening to this video. I've published a number of videos related to the Holocaust. That's my specialist area in history. There are videos on Holocaust perpetrators as well as their victims. I upload every day with a shorts video, and there are documentary style videos like this on Tuesdays and Fridays. Or if it's not a documentary style, then it's me walking around and showing you something which is historically relevant. I always upload at 2000 hours Central European time, as I live in Poland and in Germany. I sometimes also do live talks, so you can actually ask me things, and that's in real time. Talking of real time, I also try to be present when the videos premiere, which gives you a chance to chat to me and to other users. These videos feature original research, as I can speak various languages. I can also offer channel membership, which costs £5 or €6 or $6, and which currently gives you access to more than 800 videos, which are for members only. So if you're interested in real researched history made from the locations where these things happened, without the use of sensationalized language or artificial intelligence, then this is the place to be. Bye for now.